Mr. President, I'm on the floor today to urge the United States Congress to do the right thing, and that is to allow a vote on this new agreement between Mexico and Canada and the United States. Unbelievably, this agreement was negotiated a year ago. They signed it at the end of November last year, and yet for a year now, Congress has refused to take it up. It's got to go to the House of Representatives first, so Speaker Pelosi and the House Democrats who control that body have not been willing to at least take it to the floor for a vote. The agreement is such a big improvement over the status quo. The status quo is the NAFTA agreement, which is 25 years old. The new agreement, again, which was negotiated a year ago, is something that Canada wants, Mexico wants, and the United States wants. And we want it because it's really important to us. It's particularly important to my home state of Ohio, I will tell you. Our number one trading partner by far is Canada. We send about 40% of our exports to one country, Canada. And so to have a better agreement with our biggest trading partner and our second biggest trading partner, which is Mexico, is really important. Alongside Mexico, our trade with Canada accounts for about $28 billion a year. And I'm hearing a lot about it. I'm hearing from Ohio farmers. They've had a tough time. The combination of bad weather, the combination of a shrinking market for them in China, a combination of just low commodity prices even going in to the bad weather period last year has made it really tough for farmers. A lot of them are having a very difficult time making ends meet this year. They see the USMCA for what it is, which is an expansion of their market. They can sell more stuff to Canada and to Mexico, and that will help them to improve their prices and help them to be able to get through this tough period. So for them, it's a light at the end of the tunnel. If we can get this new trade agreement passed, it means expanded markets for dairy products, for pork, for corn and soybeans and other commodities. Get those prices up and give our farmers a chance to compete on a more level playing field. This is a good thing. That's why they're all for it. Businesses really want USMCA passed. By the way, I hear mostly from small businesses about this because they increasingly have looked to markets overseas, particularly Canada and Mexico and the state of Ohio, and they're concerned that if we don't put this agreement forward, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty out there, and they're going to sell less stuff rather than more stuff to these countries. So a lot of small manufacturers in particular sell a lot from Ohio to Canada and to Mexico, and they tell me they want this agreement passed and passed now because it'll really help them. My colleagues here in the Senate have to be hearing the same thing. When they go home, they've got to be hearing from these same people because all around the country, when people look at this agreement, they say, of course this is better than the status quo for my business. Workers, farmers, service providers will all benefit. Taken together, our neighbors in Canada and Mexico now make up the biggest foreign market for U.S. goods anywhere. So these two countries together combined are the biggest market anywhere in the world. 1/3 of all American exports in 2019 have gone to Canada or Mexico, way ahead of all foreign markets. It's about 12 million jobs. So 12 million jobs nationally depend on trade with Canada and Mexico. I am a former trade lawyer myself, a recovering trade lawyer, and I don't practice it today, but I did at one time. I'm also a former member of the Trade Committee in the House of Representatives called the Ways and Means Committee. And today I'm a member of the Senate Finance Committee, which is the Trade Committee over here. In the interim, I was U.S. Trade Representative for President George W. Bush. And I will tell you from all these experiences I've had in trade, I've learned one lesson, which is, yeah, it's complicated. You know, trade has a lot of nuances. It's politically difficult, but it's really important to our economy. Why? Because we've got about 5% of the world's population and about 25% of the economy here. And so it's in our interest to access that other 95% of consumers outside of America in order to keep America as a prosperous country. And that's what these trade agreements tend to do. The problem with the NAFTA agreement, the current one, is that it's 25 years old. And it needs to be updated. You know, it's one of the oldest trade agreements we have, and it's one that is fraught with problems right now, some of which are fixed in this USMCA. So the USMCA, the successor to it, is a lot better. It creates a more balanced and a more healthy trade relationship with Mexico and Canada for us. And again, for the workers and farmers and service providers that I represent and other people in this body represent. The level playing field is important because while trade works, if it's done properly and fairly, it doesn't work well when you have big trade deficits, when other countries cheat, when they don't play by the rules. And everything in this agreement helps to level that playing field. As an example, right now, our trade agreement with Canada and Mexico doesn't have a lot of things you would expect in a modern agreement, like provisions relating to the digital economy. So much of our economy now operates on the internet. And yet there's nothing in the NAFTA agreement that protects data from tariffs, as an example. Another one would be labor and environmental standards, which are weak and unenforceable under the current NAFTA. All of our new trade agreements have labor and environmental agreements, and they're enforceable. Well, guess what? USMCA does too. It includes a lot of agreements, a lot of the modern provisions that we have in our more recent trade agreements. I've got a handy little chart here to talk about some of the specific changes between USMCA and NAFTA. First, the USMCA means more jobs. The Independent International Trade Commission did a study, and they said it creates at least 176,000 new jobs. So one, new jobs, USMCA yes, NAFTA no. And by the way, from my home state of Ohio, which is a big auto state, thousands of those jobs are going to be created in the auto industry, which is a great opportunity for us in America to help to bolster our manufacturing. 176,000 new jobs is significant, 20,000 in the auto industry. In fact, it's going to grow our economy by double the gross domestic product of that was projected in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was an agreement that was done with countries in the Pacific region, Asia, and Latin America. It's an agreement that many Democrats have praised, and a few years back criticized the administration for not going into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But as much as they thought that the Trans-Pacific Partnership was going to be good for our economy, this is even better for our economy. Again, it more than doubles the GDP growth, the economic growth, as compared to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Second, the agreement does level the playing field, as we talked about. It has enforceable labor and environmental standards. USMCA, NAFTA, no. So another big difference. And by the way, these weak standards are one reason we have lost some manufacturing jobs to Mexico over the years. Third, the USMCA, as I have said, has new rules for the internet economy. Those new rules of the road are really important, particularly to small businesses in Ohio and around the country that rely on internet sales for their businesses. Unlike all of our modern trade agreements, right now there's no chapter in NAFTA, so none at all as it relates to the digital economy. Fortunately, for Ohio online businesses, the USMCA has these protections. As an example, small businesses that rely on access to Canada and Mexico are going to have an easing of their customs burden for small values of their products. So both countries have agreed to raise their cap. I frankly wish they'd agreed to raise it even more. But this is important both for small businesses that are in the internet economy to save some money from customs, from tariffs, but also it simplifies their business, which is fair because the United States has a higher cap. USMCA also prohibits requirements that data be localized in Mexico and Canada. Now, this is a big concern around the world. The countries say, okay, you can do business, but you've got to localize your data here. In other words, you've got to have your servers and your people here in our country. That's not required now under USMCA. That can be a huge barrier for small businesses. USMCA helps. And finally, it does prohibit tariffs on data, which NAFTA does not do. So these are key provisions to keep the modern economy moving. And voting against USMCA or not allowing it to come up, which is what's happening right now, really means that you believe these burdens and uncertainties should continue for our small businesses. Fourth, USMCA goes further than any agreement we've got toward leveling the playing field on steel. Steel production in this country is an incredibly important manufacturing sector. In Ohio, we're big steel producers. We're proud of that. It's one of our core industries we need to keep in this country. USMCA requires that 70% of the steel in vehicles that are produced under NAFTA in North America has to be steel from North America. So USMCA, 70% requirement. NAFTA, nothing. Nothing. And fifth, there's also an unprecedented requirement in the USMCA that's not in any other agreement in the world that helps to level the playing field considerably by saying that between 40 and 45% of vehicles have to be made in NAFTA countries by workers earning at least $16 an hour. Now, we've heard a lot about, well, it's not fair in our dealings with Mexico in particular because they have lower wage rates. Well, this is being addressed very directly in a way that's never been addressed in any previous agreement. Democrats have been talking about this for years. They should hail this as a great breakthrough and allow the NAFTA agreement to end and the USMCA to take its place because this is better. Voting for USMCA will also help level the playing field on labor costs between the U.S. and Mexico because this new agreement requires that USMCA-compliant autos and auto parts have a higher percentage of U.S. and North American content. So under the NAFTA agreement, that requirement for content is 62.5%. So if you want a car that gets within the NAFTA agreement, that gets the advantages of NAFTA, that gets to come into the United States at a lower tariff from Canada or Mexico, 62.5% of it has to be from NAFTA countries. Under USMCA, we raised that 62.5% up to 75%. This means more autos, more auto parts are going to be made here in the United States. And you'll have fewer imports and fewer jobs in other countries, like China or Japan or Germany. So this is good for us. And by the way, that 75% is the highest content requirement of any trade agreement we have. That's in USMCA. All these things are going to ensure we have more manufacturing jobs in Ohio and across the country. Frankly, the Trump administration, and particularly U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer, has listened to Democrats' concerns, listened very carefully, and then incorporated these concerns into this agreement. Now, some of the concerns have also been raised by Republicans over the years, but frankly, when I was U.S. Trade Representative, it was Democrats who mostly raised these concerns about the labor standards being enforceable and ensuring that you had something like the minimum wage that's now in this agreement. These are provisions that Democrats have demanded for years, and yet now we can't get a vote. They won't let it even be voted on. How does that make sense? How do you explain that? I don't believe any Democrat thinks the status quo, NAFTA, is better than USMCA. If they do, I would challenge them to explain to the American people why they think the status quo, NAFTA, is better than USMCA. Blocking this trade agreement hurts so many sectors of our economy, as I've talked about. It hurts our auto industry and the hardworking men and women who are on the assembly lines. It hurts our farmers. They aren't going to be able to gain new access to markets in Canada and Mexico. That's why, by the way, nearly 1,000 farm groups from across our country have now come out strongly to support USMCA. Blocking USMCA means blocking our farmers out of these markets. With all these new requirements, all these new improvements, it should be clear to everyone that this is not an effort to rebrand NAFTA. This is new. It's different. It's not your father's Oldsmobile. It's big and meaningful changes that will benefit all of us. In short, USMCA is good for jobs, it's good for small businesses, it's good for our farmers, it's good for workers, and it's good for the economy. This is a rare opportunity, my colleagues, to do something that's good for America, do it in a bipartisan way. It can have such a positive impact at a time when our country needs to have us come together and do something that's good for everybody. So to Speaker Pelosi and the House Democrats, the ball's in your court. We realize that. Under the rules up here in the Congress as to how you deal with trade agreements, this has to start in the House of Representatives. If it were to come to the floor here in the Senate, I believe it would pass, and pass with a good bipartisan margin because it just makes so much sense. But it has to go through the House first. If that agreement did come to the House floor, by the way, I believe logic would prevail and it would pass there as well. Because I believe members would say, here's my choice, and it's a binary choice. Do I go with the status quo in NAFTA that I've been complaining about for years, or do I go with the new and improved USMCA? I think that's a pretty easy vote for a lot of members who look at this objectively and with the interests of their constituents in mind. A vote for USMCA, quite simply, is a vote for improved market access, more U.S. manufacturing, a more level playing field for American workers and farmers and service providers. A vote against USMCA and blocking it from coming to the floor is a vote to keep NAFTA. It's as simple as that. A vote against USMCA is a vote for the status quo, which is NAFTA. Supporting NAFTA today means supporting unenforceable labor and environmental standards, non-existent digital economy provisions, outdated rules of origin provisions that allow more automobiles and auto parts to be manufactured overseas rather than in America. We've got a chance to fix all this by passing the USMCA. I'm confident this new agreement will pass if we can get it up for a vote, because the American people will demand it. There's plenty of time for politics between now and the 2020 election. Right now, let's focus on what's best for the American people. Let's work together and put them first, and by doing so, let's pass USMCA. I yield back my time.